To me, a manager is someone who people listen to because they have to. They have a title on an organizational chart. They have authority over you. They are typically executing on some sort of a plan that's more focused on the day-to-day. And a leader is someone who, they might not even be in a management position. They might be a peer, but it's somebody who you feel drawn to follow.
How can HR professionals empower leaders in their organization? All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we help empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronport, and my special guest today is Brittany Loraas. She's the Director of HR at GFL. And before I let her introduce herself a little bit further, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Brittany for being here with me today and to share her experience and her inspiring stories with us. So thank you very much, Brittany, and welcome to the RK Leadership Podcast.
Thanks a lot, Rob. I'm excited to be here. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last few weeks, and it's always nice to have conversations with people who are passionate about leadership. So thanks for having me. So my journey into HR wasn't exactly planned. I kind of stumbled into it I won't say by accident, but that's kind of what happened. I had initially thought I was going to be going more into the sport side. I grew up playing competitive soccer, and so when I finished high school, I went and did my kinesiology degree, my Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology from the University of Saskatchewan. So after that, I started working with our Western Hockey League team here in Saskatoon, and I was the manager of game day operations. So in that role, I oversaw upwards of 150 staff for the games. So everyone from the ushers, the in-stand crew, the folks out on the ice. So that was kind of my first taste of managing and leadership at that point, and I was only 21 years old. So kind of thrown into the fire at that point. So from there, I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided that that's not the career path that I wanted to take. So I actually interviewed for a marketing position. The degree that I had, I actually had a minor in business. So I decided, why don't I try out marketing? And I did the interview and I didn't get the job, but the HR director who interviewed me called me and said, "You didn't get the job, but I really liked you and I want you to work for me in HR. So what do you think about that?" So I said, "Sure, I'll give it a try. Why not?" So I accepted the position. I decided I should probably go back to school and finish my commerce degree. So I went back to school while I was working full time, finished my commerce degree, did that for a little while, worked with that company, and then I decided to make the move over to what was actually a family business at the time. It was a company that my dad owned. So I moved over there. I started working as the HR coordinator. We were a company of 100 employees at the time. This was 12 years ago. And over the next couple of years, we grew to about 165 before selling the company to GFL Environmental, who at the time when we got acquired, GFL was a Canadian company, only operating in Canada, 3,000 employees at the time we got acquired in 2016. And since then, we have grown to a 20,000 plus employee company across Canada and the US. We became a publicly traded company in 2020. And so over that period of time, I mean, I kind of went from starting out with a family-owned local company only operating in one province to being acquired by what was still, I would say, a fairly small company relative to where we are today, and then growing exponentially, a lot of it through acquisition. So of course, through acquisitions, for anyone who's been part of the M&A process, there is significant change management involved with that, with integrating the new employees and bringing really two cultures together. So over the last 8 years since we were acquired by GFL, it's really been a steep growth curve. So currently I oversee our Western Canadian and US operations on the environmental services side of the business. So I work with upwards of about 200 people leaders on a day-to-day basis.
Wow. Those are some tremendous numbers there, Brittany, and thank you for sharing that story with us. So you talked about change management. How important is leadership in change management, and what is their part in it?
I mean, I think the leadership is the most important part, because the trickle down effect to the rest of the layers below the senior leadership really follow their lead. And I think when we talk about a lot of the soft skills and the things that we look for and that are so critical in leadership, we talk about things like empathy and humility and integrity. And these are things that when you acquire a company and they're going through that tremendous change where they're on edge, they don't know what they're getting into. A lot of them are worried for their jobs. A lot of them have come from companies where they were family owned. So those qualities, those leadership qualities, are absolutely needed to calm those fears and calm a bit of the anxiety that these folks have.
That's right. No, those are excellent points, Brittany. And you talked about growth, and there's a lot of conversations with people around. Um, there's a lot of owners who are very mindful, and they have the fear of the fast growth. And when you talked about the exponential growth, again, what is it that people should be considering prior to that growth? Like, what's required before you get into that growth phase?
I mean, specifically on the people side, I think you're understanding the structure that you need in order to support that growth is the most important. I think we talk about this all the time, is any manager who's leading a team should always have an organizational chart on their desk, on their desktop, that they're looking at on a regular basis. And they should know the 6, 12, 18-month structure that they need to support the growth that they're projecting. And I think that if you miss that, that's where the growth fails, is when you don't have the proper resources to support that growth, and that you're not investing in your people to be ready for if an acquisition comes along where you can double in size overnight. Do you have the people that are ready to step up into the roles that are needed? And I think a lot of times it's that debate of the chicken or the egg. How much training do we put into our people before we have the roles? Do we put someone into a role a little bit before they're ready? And I think the answer to that question, if you're looking at growing, is 100% of the time you want to invest in your people early.
Amazing. Investing in people. I'm going to get into the HR side a little bit down the road. I want you to go back to the time where you became a leader. You're starting in your leadership role. How did you feel starting up in a leadership role, and what kind of training did you have previously, like prior to becoming a leader, and how do you think you were as a leader, and what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, I mean, prior to becoming a leader, I had no leadership training. I can tell you that, which I think is the case with probably 98% of the people who move into leadership roles. Which basically I see all the time, you have a little bit of experience and you have maybe some education or a course or a credential to support getting the role that you get, and you don't have the training. So it's intimidating. I think we put a little bit too much emphasis on creating this idea of what a leader is that's overcomplicated. And I think when you really boil it down to the basics, if you treat people well, you listen to them, you realize that we're all human. Just because I do a lot of spin classes, and the spin instructor a couple of weeks ago made a comment that really resounded with me, which was, just because I'm at the front of the classroom and you're sitting there, it doesn't make me better than you. We're all human. We just have different roles in this classroom. And I think it's the same thing in leadership. So I think when you boil it down to the basics, it takes away a lot of the intimidation that being in a management role has is it's really you're supporting the people who work with you towards a common goal.
That's right. So those are excellent points, Brittany, that you brought up. Now, I love your post, by the way, all the stuff you do in social media. Uh, I love how authentic you are in terms of, you're not afraid to put certain content on and, call managers out at a time. So I want to ask you this question. What is your definition, or what is the difference between a manager and a leader in your opinion?
Yeah, to me, a manager is someone who people listen to because they have to. They have a title on an organizational chart. They have authority over you. They are typically executing on some sort of a plan that's more focused on the day to day. And a leader is someone who they might not even be in a management position. They might be a peer, but it's somebody who you feel drawn to follow because you respect what they bring to the table and you trust in them. They've got vision, they've got charisma and empathy, and they've got these qualities that you don't follow them because you have to, you follow them because you want to.
Amazing. Great answer. Now, looking at managers, again, let's look at new managers that come on board. How do you transform a manager to a leader?
Yeah, I think that's been one of my focuses for the last few years. And I mean, I don't have all of the answers. I won't pretend to have all of the answers, but we have a lot of discussions about people and how many similarities there are between relationships in your life to relationships that are in the workplace. And I think that's where a lot of the similarities come in is people want to feel heard, whether that's friends in your life, family in your life, your significant other, or your employees. People want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated. And these are things that I think some managers come in and they focus so much on the business, the financials, driving sales, the equipment, if they're in the nature of business that we're in. And they lose sight of the fact that if you focus on those core relational techniques and strategies to build trust with your team, it will save you a lot of time in having to focus on all of those other things because your people care so much about delivering for you that
That's
you
right.
won't have to worry about them.
So Brittany, in your opinion, what's the best way to create or build that trust with the team as a leader?
I think it's following through on your word. We hear that a lot from employees. We hear, my manager promised me a wage increase 6 months ago. They never followed through and I never heard anything. And it can be as simple as when I started, my manager told me I was going to get a t-shirt and I never got the t-shirt. And these people, like, I mean, they hold on to that word. And when you don't deliver and you lose it, that is something. So yes, following through on your word, one. Number two is vulnerability. And I know a lot of people say all these words are so cliche, they're all over the internet now, but truly, people want to feel like they can relate to you. And that's one of the ways that you build trust is this just a manager who drives in, they've never been where I've been, they make more money than me, they live in a nicer house, they go on fancy trips, or can we relate? So how do you find that way to relate to your employees? And a lot of what we talk to our managers about is get in the field and work alongside your employees. Don't walk in and go past them and go straight to the office and close your door, because that sends a message. And when you're a leader and you're in a management position, as much as you don't realize that your people are always watching you, and your body language says so much to them. And you might be having a bad day at home and walk in and close the door, and your employees might be sitting there thinking, what did I do wrong? So I think those are open communication. I think there's so many things to build trust. If we boil it down, follow through on what you say you're going to do, stay true to your word, and be relatable to your employees.
Absolutely. So, Brittany, I want you to now take off that HR hat for the next question. I want to get into the HR side, but for the first part, I want you to tell me, what is the role of an HR in an organization?
In my opinion, if I take off my HR hat, your job is to liaise between the employees and the organization and be kind of that happy medium in the middle that is impartial. And I think that's where a lot of HR professionals go wrong, is that they side too far on the side of the employer, and the employees don't trust their HR team. And that's one thing that I've tried really hard with my team, is to kind of be in the middle, and we push back on our managers and say, like, the employee has a point here. So I think that to me is, you're the middle ground to make sure that the company's treating the employees fairly and that the employees are delivering on their side of the deal too.
That's right. And that's an excellent point. And, it kind of takes me to the next part is we hear a lot of that, and I've experienced it personally, and I've heard it from so many people where HR usually sides with the managers more often than the employees. And I want to know, like, in your opinion again, why is that happening? And why aren't they taking the side of the employees who are also the assets of the company?
I think in most cases, these HR professionals don't have a choice. I mean, they want to keep their job. They are instructed by, they also have bosses and people that they need to answer to. And I think that a lot of them are scared to share their opinion. And that's one thing that, fortunately, I have always had a bit of a backbone when it comes to that. And if I see that employees are being treated unfairly, or there's something that we're doing that's not quite right, I will push back. But I do think that in a lot of cases, these HR managers and HR professionals are instructed that you will do and say, as we tell you to. You're an extension of the organization, and you will represent the management.
That's right. And like I said, we see quite a bit of that. And being the director of HR yourself, Brittany, how would you coach people? You talked about fear, which is the number one thing in my opinion. A lot of people are the fear of reprimand, fear of losing their job. How would you coach new HR personnel when they join your team not to have that fear and do what's right instead?
For me, it's figuring out what your own personal values are and staying true to those values regardless.
Mhm.
And I think that in any position, not just HR, but I think the mismatch in values between an individual and the organization that they work for causes a lot of the turmoil that people have in their jobs, because they want change, they want things to be a certain way, they want to go out and solve the world's problems, and the organization doesn't see things the same way, and they don't want those same things, and there's a mismatch in values. So my advice would be, what are your values? Figure that out before you go in. And if part of your values are that you're going to represent the best interests of the employees, and your company doesn't support that, then to me, I would make a change, because I wouldn't be able to work in that misalignment of values.
I love that answer. And I love that answer where you talk about the values. So one of the things I've implemented in my interviews is actually asking people what their top 5 values are. And if they don't align with the organization or, what I have, it that the fact that it doesn't match will cause problems down the road. So
Exactly.
that's a great point. Now, Brittany, what is the role of HR in developing leaders within the organization?
Every organization's a little bit different. And I think HR, over the last, I'll call it 15 years, has gone from what was historically a very administrative function to becoming a lot more of a strategic partner in leadership. And I think a lot of organizations have realized the importance and the value of having high level strategic HR partners at the senior level. So over the last number of years, I mean, it's gone from basically HR being an afterthought to a lot of organizations are now participating and highly involved in leadership development programs. I'm a lot more on the more informal side of things. I find that a lot of the formal leadership programs are good to supplement, and they're good as kind of a kickstart if someone moves into a management role, moves into an executive role. But how do you shift the culture, and how do you shift someone to be exercising and practicing those leadership qualities on a day-to-day basis versus going to a course and for 3 weeks they're good after that because it's top of mind, but then they revert back to old behaviors. So I think HR serves a purpose in helping shape the framework for the development on the formal side, but also, and even more important for me, is the day-to-day conversations and coaching that you have with your managers to help get them thinking in a different way and keeping people top of mind on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's a huge gap in a lot of organizations, because what we've seen, over the years is your manager, your leader's calendar is now filled from 8 or 9 to 5 o'clock. And I always challenge leaders and managers, and I ask them the question, how much time are you actually spending with your direct reports in terms of coaching them? And the answer is like next to none.
Yeah.
And that's scary. So I'm glad that you said that. Now, again, I want to get your advice on people who want to get into the HR profession. What would your advice be to newcomers in HR?
To people who are already in HR or considering it as a career path.
Considering that as a key.
I think my advice would be to truly reflect on what you're passionate about, and I guess where you're at in your own development journey, because HR is not for the faint of heart. You're dealing with different personalities every single day, and you're usually getting a lot of complaints. You're usually hearing when people don't like what's going on. You rarely hear the good things. So I think a lot of HR professionals go into it thinking it's going to be different than it is. And while I think that there may be some levels, if you want to stay more at a lower level in HR, if you want to move up, you're going to have to deal with conflict. You're going to have to deal with difficult conversations. You're going to have to deal with coaching managers who think that they know everything. And you have to have the ability to influence. HR is never a decision maker in an organization. Any organization that I've been a part of or aware of, HR is always an influencer. So if you don't have these qualities, if you're not someone who can influence, who can mediate conversations and calm people down, it's a challenging career path to take, because you do need thick skin and you need a backbone like we talked about. So my advice would be is to really reflect on what you bring to the table, where you are in your own journey, what qualities you have, and what type of work pace you want moving forward, and make your decision based on that. But I will say it's a very rewarding career path to be in. There are so many people that I have seen come into the company in entry-level roles and move up into senior director, VP roles now over the last 10 years. And people who you just see that light bulb go off. And it's those conversations that are so rewarding and make it all worthwhile. So it's a mix. No day is the same, and you've got a lot of balls in the air all the time. So again, it's not for the faint of heart. You have to be able to juggle a lot of different things, but it's a rewarding career.
Excellent. So now my question to you with respect to that is, now HR deals with a lot of people, right? So do you think they should also have leadership qualities?
I think it depends on the role you're in. There are a lot of roles that are more analyst type roles in HR now. The more we move to to the high focus on systems, we've got and data. There's a lot of more analyst type people in HR. If you are an HR professional that is directly dealing with people, then absolutely yes, I think that they need leadership training, because how can we train leaders and coach leaders if we don't have the basics ourselves? So yes, I do agree that that's needed.
Awesome. So Brittany, what are your thoughts on how do leaders lead in a unionized environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is no, they don't lead any differently than they lead in a non-unionized environment. And I think that is where so many leaders in unionized environments go wrong. And I mean, I've seen it time and time again, as it's like, no, we won't do this, we won't do that, we won't do the other thing because they're unionized. But at the end of the day, is the goal of the business still to have an employee base that has high morale, you have high retention, you have a safe workforce, they're efficient, you have a profitable business? And if the answer is yes, then you need to treat your people well, and you need to treat them the same as you do in a non-unionized work environment.
That's right. That's right. You nailed it. And I think everybody thinks, it's a different, it's people are people. Unionized, non-unionized, you're still dealing with people. It's just a title or whatever you want to call it on top of it.
Yeah.
Brittany, being in HR, I got to ask you this question. How important is employee engagement from an HR perspective? And how do you measure engagement in your organization?
Yeah, to me, employee engagement is huge. We spend a lot of time focused on that. And that started from kind of my starting point with the company and more of the family-based company. I think that the smaller companies have a lot easier time with employee engagement and they focus on it more. So we've really tried to make sure that we continue to do that, and we've done a great job of it. I do think it's important. I think understanding that you're going to have some employees that don't want anything to do with it because they just want to show up. They're going into work for a paycheck. That's what it is. It's a paycheck and they want to leave, and we can't force if they don't want to get more involved in different things, and then that is what it is. But I think having an engaged workforce, when we look at some of our sites that have a more engaged workforce, you look at all of the different metrics, you look at their safety scores, and you look at their retention, and you look at the profitability of the business, and everything, it's a trend line. Everything does better when the employees are engaged. We do what we call retention interviews. So we started doing these years ago. And I mean, a lot of companies do them, a lot call them stay interviews, retention interviews. We historically did a lot of exit interviews, which, I mean, you find out as someone's walking halfway out the door what their problems were, and you usually get an earful. So, I mean, it's okay to get that feedback too, but typically it's too late. So what we do is retention interviews. We'll go into a branch and the staff know we're coming in, our HR team goes in, and we have one-on-one conversations with every single one of the employees. And we just talk about how things are going, how the leadership is on site, how the wages and compensation is, how the safety culture is. We go through a number of different categories. And from there, we summarize the feedback across the main trends that came up across the entire employee group. And we sit down with the management the next week and come up with an action plan to solve those issues. So we don't, I prefer, I know a lot of organizations do the big company-wide employee engagement surveys, and we actually are about to launch one of those company-wide. But I like to get in the weeds and have the conversations with the employees to get a pulse on where that staff and that team is at. So that's how we handle it in the areas that I work with.
But don't you think that should be also up to the leaders to have those conversations and provide you guys with that feedback?
It is, and it's interesting because that's where we hear these things. Like, my manager told me 6 months ago I was going to get a hat, and they never gave me a damn hat. So it's, as much as I'd like to say that yes, the managers are just going to give us the feedback, you go in and it's almost like the employees are just, they've written their 4 pages of notes and they're waiting for you to walk in to have a new set of ears listen to what's going on and hear a different perspective. And I think the best response is when our answers to their issues are exactly aligned with what their managers told them, because it shows that we've got a strong and tight leadership culture, which we see that happen a lot, but it's that the employees just wanted to hear that someone else is backing up this manager saying, yes, in fact, this is the way it is. They're not just saying this to you. So I think those retention interviews bring a lot of value, and it does often what we always say to the managers, they get a little bit on edge when we do them. And there's almost always more good that comes out of them and more positive feedback and more benefits that come down the road than negative. So they do really work well.
That's really interesting. I'd never heard of that before. So how often are you guys having these retention interviews?
We typically go to one site per month. So we'll do 12 in a year.
Very nice. Awesome. And Brittany, what is your take on the like one-on-one sessions, performance appraisals? How often should leaders be having those with their team? And we hear about the ticky boxes, and it's required by HR to do this, and your bonus is based on it. What's your take on that?
I have not been a lover of the annual performance review in many, many years. I think there's just too many downfalls with it. But if organizations do use it, it needs to be supplemented with regular quality one-on-one interactions with your employees. And I think that's where some organizations go wrong with it, is that the managers, they save up in their little notebook all the feedback they have all year for their performance review, and it doesn't do anybody any good. I think that where a lot of managers go wrong with their one-on-ones is that they don't know how to have quality one-on-one discussions, and they focus more on more surface level things and more give me the update on X, Y, and Z project so that I can hang up the phone with you and pick up the phone with my boss and regurgitate what you just said. And it's not to serve, the one-on-one should be to serve your employees and not for them to serve you information. And
That's
I think that's where it's going wrong, is they're not being utilized in the right way. So I do think that one-on-one discussions with your employees should be happening at least bi-weekly. If you're not talking to your employees, having a quality conversation with them at least every 2 weeks. I mean, I don't blame them for feeling disconnected from the business and not knowing what's going on or what's the vision here if you're not talking to them on a regular basis. So I understand fully how busy managers can be and you're pulled in so many different directions. But I actually read a really good Joanna Nix from the company Nix. I think everyone in Canada knows that she had a huge exit from that company in the last few years. She was on Dragon's Den and Michelle Romano invested in her company. But anyways, she had a post on Instagram a little while ago that showed her schedule with Nix, and they blocked out full days in their entire organization with no meetings so they could have their one-on-one time and invest time in developing and leading their people. And to me, that's where we need to be headed, is the more time you prioritize into your people, the less meetings you have to have on all the problems, because I think they'll suddenly start to resolve themselves and you have a more engaged workforce.
Absolutely, 100%. And I actually love that. I love the, blocking that time to spend. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think, that one-on-one should be happening on a regular basis without even you having to set up, like, talk to your team on a daily basis. Don't wait for that formal, one-on-one to give them feedback. If there's an opportunity for you to give them feedback, and this goes with recognition as well, that it has to be, timely, and it has to be specific. You can't be waiting until the end of the year to say, oh, by the way, 7 months ago, you did that thing really well, because they won't even remember what that was about. And it doesn't, feel well to be appreciated 8 months later after you did something. So
Exactly. And also, I know a lot of managers, and you read a lot of things about the topic of, should you talk to employees on a personal level, or is that kind of like a line you don't want to pass? And when we go back to that topic of building trust with your team, I don't know how you could feel connected to a leader who knows absolutely nothing about your life away from work. And I've always said to our managers, we're all human beings first, employees second. And if you can't have a conversation with your employees about their kids' soccer game on the weekend or their last holiday they went on with their significant other, then I think we're going wrong on the human element that we need to be considering.
That's right. I think you nailed it. Again, it goes back to that human, aspect. You don't have to get too involved, or you don't have to get too personal, and you can keep it at a level where, the other side is comfortable with. But I think that's also where, I found throughout my career being able to help people even outside the workspace, and
Yeah,
you really appreciate it because it shows that you actually care about them as a human being, not just as an employee, right?
exactly.
So great point there. Now, Brittany, again, another point that leaders I think should be doing a better job in the workplace is development, succession planning, and just having formal plans. Again, not waiting until the end of the year saying, okay, what are your goals? Let's put it on paper and then never look at it again. What's your take on development plans and succession plans as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to that. I think there's the side of understanding what your employees want, and then there's the side of understanding what the business needs are, and especially if you're projecting growth. I was just working today on some succession planning documents for some meetings in a couple of weeks. And I mean, it's something that I don't think enough companies prioritize. And it's something that has such a huge impact when somebody walks out that door with all of the knowledge that they have, and we don't have a succession plan in place. So we talk about looking at what are the key roles that we need to identify successors for. And that's not just leadership roles, that's roles where maybe it's a unique role where it's a unique skill set and it's hard to find someone to hire in that skill set. So identify what those roles are. What is the skill set, the capabilities, what's the ideal person in that role today? And what's the ideal person in that role in 1 year from now? Because if you're projecting growth in your business, that person, the ideal person, might look different in a year from now than they do today.
That's right.
And then we use the 9 box a lot to assess our employees. I really like it. I love the potential and the performance rating scale, and rating it against the values of your team or your company. So what we've done is we've gotten together with our leadership teams and said, what do we value in our team here? Because what we value might be different than the next company. So while someone might be a high performer, high potential at the next company, maybe with us, they're a medium performer, a medium potential, depending on the values. So going through that exercise. And then step 3 is the employees that we're identifying as high potentials, do they even want to move up?
Yeah.
Like, what are their career goals? And I think sometimes we put all our eggs in one basket without talking to these people. And then the day comes and we're like, okay, right on, we're ready to pull the trigger. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I do not want this. I'm happy in the position I'm in. I don't want to move up. So having those discussions, and that's where those regular kind of interactions really come in handy, is that you should know that if you've got a high potential employee and you don't know what their career goals are, that's a big problem. And you're likely going to lose those high potentials if you don't know the answers to those questions. And then number 4 is, what are the next steps that you're going to take with these individuals in order to develop them? And I know, again, we go back to the chicken or the egg. How much can you develop and train your people before you can move them into a position? And it's a struggle that young companies have with young leaders when there's not an immediate opportunity to promote. But there's a lot of different things that we can do with giving them exposure to the budgeting process or cross training or job shadowing. So yeah, I mean, I think succession planning is only going to become more and more critical because we see that the length of time people are spending at jobs is shrinking. There's a lot more job hopping going on. So it's definitely something that we are focusing on and that I think is critical for companies to look at.
That's right. No, those are excellent points. I remember doing the 9 boxes in one of the organizations I worked for. Again, it's fantastic. It's great. But if you don't put it into action, or you don't do anything with it, it's just a nice, fancy, again, exercise that people do. So,
Yeah, it's not one and done. It should
yeah,
be the org chart. It should be up every month. People
yes.
are moving through it. You should be having people move within it. So yeah, I think that's anything that is related to your people operations that you do one time and you think you're done. I think that's where the problem is that they're all dynamic documents that you need to be constantly looking at.
That's right. And I think I told you this before. You're probably one of my favorite HR people to talk to because it's a breath of fresh air when you really understand what leadership is about and you're striving to, move the company in the right direction with that vision. So, kudos to you for that, Brittany.
I appreciate that.
No worries. Now I want to shift a little backwards in your, earlier time in life where you told me that you grew up in a family where everyone was an entrepreneur. I want you to tell me what was the best lesson you learned, being a part of that family who's all like, you said they're all entrepreneurs. And also the big debate out there is, are all entrepreneurs leaders?
Hmm. Yes. So, what did I learn from it? I mean, I think everyone looks at entrepreneurs and sees, I want that. I want to be that. That looks like the dream. And I think I learned because I saw the behind the scenes that it's not any easier than, like, you think it looks so easy because all you see is the success, but the work that goes behind it is exponential. So I think it's really understanding that behind every entrepreneur is a lot of work, a lot of heartache, a lot of challenges, a lot of stress to get to where they're at. So I actually appreciate that perspective a lot because I think normalizing all of that work and the fears and the stresses and the self-doubt and all of those things, I think it makes it easier for me now in some of these things like the social media to think, well, I'm not the only one who feels this way. We're all in the same boat here.
That's right.
So yeah, that was, I think, a good lesson. And I would say the other one is your reputation is everything if you're an entrepreneur. I think if you botch that, then you have a really hard time getting that back if you're a business owner. Are all business owners good leaders? Absolutely not. No, they're not. And I think a lot of business owners, especially in more of the blue collar business, are just good at their trade or good at what they do. And they wanted to start a business. Maybe they're a good plumber, they start a plumbing business. They know nothing about leadership. And I think that's where a lot of these businesses, and I think the fail rate of new businesses is so high. And I think that that's one of the contributing factors is that they don't know how to manage and lead people. They know how to do the technical job that they've been good at all their life, that they decided one day, I don't want to work for this person anymore. I want to work for myself. So I'm going to start my own business. But they didn't do anything to learn how to manage and lead people. So, I mean, I think I give kudos to entrepreneurs. I don't want to take anything away from people who have the courage to start their own business because I know how intimidating and scary that can be. But I think if a lot of them opened up their mind to the importance of leadership skills, they would see a lot more success in their businesses.
So I love that. That's a great answer, Brittany. And I think, most of the time, a lot of these, especially like younger entrepreneurs too, uh, that ego gets in the way because you're starting something and, you're really good at that thing. You think, across the board, you can be the finance person, the CFO, the COO. You gotta find what your weaknesses are and bring in people to complement, your strength. So those are great points. So thank you for sharing that. Now, before we wrap up the podcast, we've reached a segment of what I call rapid fire questions. So I'll be asking you a series of questions, and whatever comes to your mind, you can give me the answer for.
Okay, well, I'm
Good.
scared.
All right. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, feel fear and do it anyway.
Mm, excellent. What is your advice to all the young leaders out there?
Um, Listen to your people.
Mm,
Become a good listener, and I think you'll do well.
amazing. How can HR professionals empower leaders in their organization?
How can HR professionals empower leaders in their organization? I would say, again, I think it's listening to them. I think listening is just so overrated. Listening, letting them hear themselves talk, and oftentimes they come up with a solution without you having to even say anything.
Sounds like coaching.
Exactly.
What word describes Brittany best?
Oh, I've been called facetious. I've been called many things. Yeah, we'll go with facetious.
What is the most difficult emotion to control as a leader?
Mm, oh, there's so many. I'm gonna say the first one that came to mind was anger.
Okay,
Probably embarrassment is another one. I think embarrassment comes through as anger a lot of times.
excellent. Okay. And what is a highly underrated leadership skill in your opinion? I took this.
Well, I could stick to my theme of listening.
Okay.
Good listener.
This one is directly from your social media.
Oh my gosh, I always have to. What is it? Now I need to remember this.
But I think you nailed it in the last part. It's the ability to coach, you said,
Yeah.
which is listening and people coming
Yes.
up with their own solutions. So, and the last question for you is, where can people find Brittany?
My Instagram account, Brittany.Loraas. So I don't know if, are you able to tag that in your
Yes,
podcast?
I
Okay,
will
awesome.
definitely be doing that. Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, I wanted to take this time to thank you again for sharing your experience and valuable knowledge with the audience. For those out there who have any questions for Brittany, you can drop it in the box below, in the comment box below, and I'll make sure it gets to her, or you can reach her directly on her IG, which I will put on this podcast. Again, thank you so much, Brittany, for joining me tonight. I greatly appreciate it. And for all those listening, thank you very much and see you in the next podcast. Bye, everybody.